Join the 6-Dot revolution. The 6-Dot Braille Label Maker has everything you need to create high-quality Braille labels in any language in only seconds. Powerful but simple, the 6-Dot ergonomic design makes it easy for children and adults of all ages to label practically anything at home, at school, at the office, or on the go. Throw this innovative 6-Dot Braille Label Maker in your bag and start labeling the world. For more information on the 6-Dot Label Maker, visit logantech.com today. Blink and you may have missed it. Blink, where the season world premiere goes live right now. After 25 years of the Americans with Disabilities Act, is it still 70% unemployment amongst the blind? Allow me to introduce you to Blink. We're here to make history and change the world by raising the bar and shaping statistics.
Hey, so it's Vashon Jones, and I am here in my office, and I'm using a condenser mic. Yeah, that's what it is. So you're going to get a bit more wider sound as the mic is about 4 feet away from me. But I'm thinking about this question as we start the season premiere of Blink, and I'm thinking, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, how you lost your sight, and some of the tools that you've used along your journey. Just amazing to hear you guys' stories. So let's go ahead and jump right in.
Amanda Berkeley.
I grew up like everyone else, just a normal girl. I was fully sighted until I was 18. I went to school in East Texas. My graduating class, in fact, only had 65 people. Probably 4 months after I turned 18, I started having really bad headaches, was nauseous. So I went to the doctor and they're like, oh, you've got the flu. You know, here's some anti-nausea medicine. Here's some anti-inflammatories. Just ride it out. Drink plenty of fluids. You'll be fine. About 3 weeks after the second round of being sick, I was driving down the road and I blacked out, like I couldn't see anything. And I ran over a parked motorcycle that was parked in front of a building because I couldn't tell the difference between the motorcycle and the building. The motorcycle was a burnt orange and the building was a real orangey red. And of course, you know, the cops get called and my mom's coming in. She's like, oh my God, are you okay? And I was like, Mom, I didn't see the motorcycle. So my mom, we got an appointment at the eye doctor, went in. He said, let's take some pictures. So he took some pictures of my optic nerves and my eyes. And he said, your optic nerves are really, really red. He said, well, let's go to an ophthalmologist and see what they have to say. Let's do an MRI. And then I guess it was about 2 days after the MRI, my mom came to school to get me. I was in my integrated physics and chemistry class, and the intercom comes over, and the secretary says, Miss Countryman, I need you to send Amanda Berkeley to the office, please. Her mother's here to get her. And my mom was like, come on, you're going home right now. And I was like, what's going on? She's like, well, we're going to go pack your bags because you're going to see a neurosurgeon. What do you mean a neurosurgeon? Like a brain surgeon? And she was like, here. And she hands me this piece of paper. And I was like, I can't read this. Like the print just doesn't, it all kind of runs together. And she was like, okay, well, it's this humongously long word that tells us that you have fluid retention on your brain. And so we have to go to a neurosurgeon because they're going to have to put in a shunt system. And I was like, oh. I was a normal teenager 5 minutes ago. Now I'm not sure what I am. I went to the neurosurgeon. At this point, it's May 17th of 2006. My high school graduation is May 26th. Can we wait till after that? Like, yeah, I imagine we can. And my mom was like, no, you're doing it now. I'll get you in. We'll do the surgery. You'll be out the morning of the 26th and you can still go to graduation. I was like, okay, I can do this. I went in still being able to see relatively well. I could have navigated by myself without an assistance of a cane or a dog. When I came out of surgery, I couldn't see anything but lights, movement, and shadows. 3 days later, I got out of the hospital and I went home, slept for a little while, had someone cut my hair so that my hair would cover up the shaved part of my head where they put in the staples, and went to graduation. And I went to graduation in a wheelchair because I couldn't physically walk the procession.
Anaya Minor.
I am currently living in Manhattan in New York City, but I am from San Sebastian. It's a small town in the north of Spain near the frontier with France. I moved to the US last year because I got married with a born and raised New Yorker. I've been blind since birth with congenital glaucoma and cataracts, and I've been using technology resources since I was a kid. I learned Braille when I was 3. Then I started with the computers back then in the late 80s. Around when I was 8 or 9, I started with voice synthesizer that you connected to all those old computers with, well, I don't even remember the name.
Right.
Then I passed to the Tiflo Win 95 with Windows. Then JAWS in Windows. Then I learned after 09, I taught myself how to use a Mac and VoiceOver. And after 11, I taught myself how to use an iPhone and iOS device with VoiceOver too.
Ashley Coleman.
I grew up in a small town here in North Carolina. I lost my sight when I was born prematurely. My optic nerve didn't fully develop. So I've been blind since birth. I grew up using Braille as my main format of information. And in high school, I learned JAWS and had been using JAWS until 2006 when I switched over to using JAWS and NVDA with a Braille display.
Christopher O'Mealy.
I grew up here in Richmond, Virginia, lived here all my life. I have been blind from birth, and growing up, I didn't really hang around the blind crowd. I didn't even know much about my blindness, to tell you the truth. And it wasn't until I started interacting with people that I knew there were other blind individuals in the world, and so until then, I had just used the remaining sight that I had. And when I start getting, farther and farther along in school, and I got an aide to help me with, getting my Braille and all that stuff, is when I was introduced to a lot of these alternate techniques that I now know. And I guess a lot of the stuff that I use now, I learned on my own. I learned some things in school, but most of the things I learned in school had to do with school. Mm-hmm. But for independent living stuff, a lot of that I had to learn on my own because, like I said, I didn't really interact with many blind people. There were some in my school, but I used to be quiet, believe it or not. And so they didn't really know I existed until I got to high school and I got involved in sports. I ran track for a little while and wrestled and all that. And one of the other blind students at my high school approached me and was like, "Hey, how are you doing all this stuff?" And so that's, I guess, when I really realized that, not every blind person goes out for full contact sports like that. I started getting into technology and accessible technology specifically. I don't know why it just suddenly interested me. I went from, being super active all the time and being out late because of track meets and wrestling meets and all that stuff, that I honestly didn't see my interest shifting as suddenly as it did. And I pretty much went from, being one of the most active members of my family to sitting up in my room and taking stuff apart to see how they work.
Curtis Jackson.
I'm originally from Louisiana, now living in Wichita, Kansas. 36 years old, be 37 in November. I've been blind since birth. I had congenital glaucoma. I had 3 cornea transplants. They all rejected. Growing up, I went through the public school, went to the Louisiana Center for the Blind to develop my independent living skills, and went to Louisiana Tech for a couple of years and did the Randolph Shepherd vending program for a little while, and came up here to work a manufacturing job at Envision. And eventually somebody that I met named Steve Fortine encouraged me to learn computers because I wanted a job working with him as an assistive technology teacher. And he was like, "Well, you need to do a little more. You need to learn IT and, learn about the computers. It's good to know the assistive technology, but there's no AT if there's no IT because you can't fix it." I took his advice and, I got the A+, and several other certifications, and so I use stuff like JAWS, NVDA, and eventually I got into using Apple products like Mac and the iPhone and iPad, and now I'm working on my Network Plus and my Security Plus.
Daniel Aronoff.
I am a New Yorker, born and raised here in New York City. I love it. I lost my sight when I was 3 years old. I had a brain tumor. I have some light and shadow perception currently. It gets me around well enough. I graduated with a master's degree in social work, and I'm all about giving back and helping people. So anything I can do to further those two aspirations, I definitely will go for. Also, people call me the blind food critic. I have a site at blindtastetest.net. It's something I love to do, is to review restaurants. It started out as just a blog in 2008, and now it's turned into a full-blown, full-fledged website where I have probably 150 reviews of restaurants now all around the world. But I'm also into technology very much, and it's just a passion of mine. Also, it's been sort of a hobby over the years. I started out very young learning technology, as other people have, and I really have grown to love it of all sorts. I even got into the whole Apple game with the iPhone and the Mac Air and all that kind of stuff. So I really just embrace everything new that comes out. So I'm just really excited to be here.
Daniel Hawkins.
I was born in a small city called Wood River. It's in Illinois, about 25 miles east of St. Louis, Missouri. And when I was born, I was 6 weeks premature. And I was actually stuck in the hospital for 3 months. I had a lot of intestinal issues. I ended up having my intestine ruptured. And we're not quite sure exactly what happened, maybe because of overdose of drugs or something, but I had developed more issues later on, which also entailed my hearing loss and my left eye going blind. And 3 years later, my sister also went through the same ordeal as I did, but she had lost her vision at 5 years old and almost completely lost her hearing. However, for me, my right eye was good enough to drive all the way up until I was age 25. So I had a driver's license, I could drive, I can read, and do a lot of functions like what most people can do. However, at 25 years old, I had developed cataracts, which, it's okay, common. But because of my blindness in one eye and my sister's blindness, I have a high risk for that. So my doctor decided, well, you have a high risk for that. Enjoy your vision until you go completely blind, then we do the surgery. Okay, sounds good. In the meantime, I have married my wife, and it was a wonderful marriage. We had a beautiful marriage, but shortly after that, my vision started dropping. So we did a cataract surgery in December. 3 years later, I am completely blind in both eyes. And my left eye, prosthetic, that I taken out 114, I forgot to mention that. And my right eye, I should be able to see, but I can't because my cornea is so scratched up. So for the past 3 years, I've been doing everything I can to live independently. And because I had grew up with being disabled and had to work so hard to be independent, it got more frustrating. It's like you got cut off at your knees. So because of my frustration, I was like, other blind people should not go through this. So what I want to do is actually help other blind people get through the frustration I had. They don't have the experience what I did.
Don C.
I grew up in the outskirts of Chicago in a suburb called Cicero. I now currently live in the city of Chicago. Yeah, I believe in big changes. I have an eye condition known as retinitis pigmentosa, which is a degenerative eye condition. I gradually lost my vision, and it almost completely left around 2 years ago. If we are talking about tools to make me a more successful, I was born in the late 70s, so I remember growing up as a child. I remember the Apple IIe.
Wow.
And the Vert Plus. And at the time, I remember thinking, this is the greatest thing ever.
Yep.
And then I remember when JAWS came along the way, like, forget Vert. JAWS is going to be the wave of the future.
There you go.
And then Apple came along. I got my first 4S. I'm like, if this lasts the week, I'm going to eat my phone. I could not stand it. And I couldn't stand it because I couldn't understand it. But once I figured it out, I said, toodaloo, JAWS, I don't need you anymore either.
Derek Cleveland.
I grew up in Mobile, Alabama, and I lost some of my sight at the age of 4. Weak eye. It's basically just a weak eye. And I lost all the rest of the vision like a year ago. I'm out here still doing that. Can't stop. I got to keep on moving.
Did you go to like the school for the blind or?
Yeah, I went to school for the blind. Then I went to Arkansas to
Lions World?
Yeah.
Okay.
Get my certification for ATI.
How long ago was that?
2000. I finished there in 2011.
Okay. Being in ATI, you like technology. So what's some of the technology that you use?
You know, of course I use JAWS. I use NVDA.
Okay.
I'm still learning that. It's a process of learning that.
Mm-hmm. Different.
I'm using Windows Eyes. And right now I'm using iOS.
Don Shaw.
I've always had a visual problem for my entire life. Grew up in Houston. Back in the day, I'm a little older, but back in the day, we would go to public school, and we would have like a special ed homeroom with braille writers and things like that. In the summer of high school, I was restless. You know how teenagers are, wanting to do something different. I heard about a summer program at the School for the Blind in Austin, and it was just mostly in the summer program, more than education, just like learning skills of doing different things. And I said, I want to go and see what that's like. And got up there and did the summer program and really liked it. Liked it so much that I decided to go ahead and apply for my last 2 years of high school to do them up there. So to make a long story short, I did that. Last 2 years of high school up there. Liked it a lot. Worked a half a day and did academics the other half. And I've always been a tech person. Got into computers probably when Windows came out, Windows 95. And a friend of mine had told me about a sort of a screen reader that you would kind of like copy and paste the text into, and it would read it. And got by with that for a while, messed around with that. Had heard of some different screen readers that I experimented with and did the computer for years. Got a job at a small junior college helping students. Like it was a student lab that we had for students that needed to come and use a screen reader or get like text scanned in.
Donna Shanton.
I grew up in Montreal, Canada. I think I've been an advocate for as long as I can remember. I have a Bachelor of Commerce degree from a university in Montreal. I have an MBA from McGill University. I have worked for 3 large Canadian corporations, 2 banks and IBM Canada. And, as I have moved along my own career path, I have continued my own advocacy efforts. I've been an entrepreneur now for over 20 years. And, as I guess my claim to fame, as people would say, is that in 2006, I started my charter challenge against the Canadian government over their inaccessible websites. And by 2012, I, on behalf of all blind Canadians, had won a landmark victory, forcing the Canadian government to make all of their websites accessible. Now I am engaged in what we call lobbying for a Canadians Disabilities Act, because Canada is one of the few developed countries that does not have an ADA equivalent. Mm-hmm. So this is our goal right now.
Eva Bagara.
I have retinopathy of prematurity, which means I was a preemie. I only weighed 2 pounds, 2 ounces. I like technology, and I went to a regular school, just like anybody else. I used to go to the School for the Blind in Texas in the summer only. Yeah, that's let's see, a little bit about me, I guess.
Leo Desnet.
I'm 62 years of age right now. I'm retired, but I keep very active doing some consulting, working with university students and seniors with technology who want to learn about it here in the Montreal area. I lost my vision. I was premature at birth, and as a result, the retina was scarred, ROP, and as a result, I was totally blind all my life. Well, I had a little vision, but lost most of it by the time I was 40 as a result of cataract and glaucoma factoring in. I went to a residential school for the blind, went on to high school, an integrated setting, and on into university. And that's where life really got interesting in graduate school. I began to have a real need for advanced computer technology to do social science analysis with statistics. And that's where I met a professor who got me through that. But he really had some ideas about where technology had to go for, as he used to refer to the disability community. And that was my start. He was doing some work in the lab on preliminary voice synthesizers, and I got hooked. I ended up going into rehab work. So my career in sociology didn't quite happen, and that was a good thing. I ended up working in rehab for the Montreal Association for the Blind, where I taught the VersaBraille. And that got me into technology training and usage. And then I ended up going back to the university as the manager of the Office for Students with Disabilities for about 35 years when I retired 2 years ago.
Paul Ferrara.
Well, I grew up in northern Delaware, lived there until I went to college in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and I've moved around a little bit since then. But I've lived in Louisville, Kentucky for about the last 12 to 15 years. I absolutely love it here. As far as tools growing up, of course, I wouldn't call it technology, but a cane, absolutely needed a cane growing up. When it comes to technology, first thing I started with, of course, was the Braille writer. Moved on to a typewriter around the same time and tried an Opticon too. I wasn't really a big fan of it. I never really got the hang of that. When I got into 7th grade, my itinerant teacher said, you know how to type now. We're not going to do any more translation for you from print to Braille or Braille to print. You're going to type everything. And that's just how it's going to be. And then after that, first computer was the old Apple IIe with the Echo speech synthesizer. I had a VersaBraille. Went to the Braille and Speak, which was really nice. Nice and small and portable, not noisy, easy to carry around. That was most of college. Got my first Windows computer back in 1995. I've been using different desktops and laptops since then. Got my first iPhone in 2011, and that's just changed how I've done so many things. And now I'm starting to learn more and more about the Mac and really liking it. And then I can't leave out guide dogs. I've had 3. I just got a brand new one in January named Jeremiah.
Okay.
And been a huge help to me as far as mobility.
Roxana Cleveland.
I grew up in Alabama. I was born in Bolivia and I was adopted when I was 5. I was born blind, as far as I know. Mm-hmm. I don't have any records that say otherwise.
Okay.
My right eye was removed when I was little, before I came to the States. And then I had light perception in my eye, in my left eye, until I was 26. And my eye pressure got really high when I was 26. And I had to have a cornea transplant. And therefore now I cannot see anything. I have read Braille ever since I can remember, when I was in kindergarten. And I would say a very proficient Braille user. And in school, we learned how to use the computer. We used, and when we first started on the computers, we started out with those Apple IIe things back in the day.
Yeah.
I really didn't start getting into much technology until after I graduated from high school. Then when I graduated from high school, I went to college, and I was introduced to my first piece of Braille technology was the Braille and Speak.
Okay.
I did not like the Braille and Speak because I like to see what I'm typing. I like to read it. I'm a more hands-on person. So I was happy when the Braille Note came out because I could because it had a Braille display with it. Also, I learned how to use JAWS, and I learned how to use Windows. I graduated with my English degree in 2006, and
the rest was history?
Yeah.
Ryan Kwok.
I grew up in Illinois. I was born here at Christ Hospital in Oak Lawn. But my heart lies in Columbia, Kentucky, where I have a great many relatives still there. I was born blind. I had septum optic dysplasia, which basically means there's a certain element in your brain that was missing, and that's caused all that, and my optic nerve was underdeveloped. So, and I learned Braille when I was 3. I was in one of those public school resource rooms, which odd, because from what I hear, a lot of people with my particular condition don't necessarily get the kind of training and the empowerment that they need in regard to Braille instruction. Mm-hmm. And so from my vantage point, I consider myself blessed. I have a brand new computer. Well, it's actually a refurbished Windows 7 Professional 32-bit computer. I have NVDA. I have Window Eyes. I'm familiar with JAWS, but it's a huge investment. But yeah, NVDA seems to work well. It's definitely come a long way from its beginnings, and it's a community-driven project, which means any new updates could come out or any new add-ons, which could enhance accessibility for various applications and what have you. Another tool, obviously, is when vocational rehab, when I was a client over there, they got me this nice little PackMate Omni, which I don't use that very much, but I do use this handy Braille display that came with it to create documents and be able to read them back. And it helps me a lot with voiceover scripts, because if I'm recording and taking directions from a client on the phone, I'm listening to them direct me, I could just go back and reread without having to use any kind of speech whatsoever.
Shelley Smith.
I was born and raised in South Carolina, in Gaffney, and I was raised by my grandmother because my parents were really young when I was born, and I was born blind, but my parents didn't find it out until I was 3 months old, I think. And then it was just a hard thing for them to deal with. So I was raised by my grandmother, my dad's mother.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother, she always told me, nobody's going to do anything for you. You're going to have to do it all yourself. I was raised just like the rest of the kids, my cousins, and I had another sister, and I was never treated any differently. I went to the South Carolina School for the Deaf and Blind for a while. And then I went back to my hometown of Gaffney and went to public school. And that was back in the day. They didn't have any computers or anything, any kind of assistive technology there when I went. I was the first blind person they'd ever seen or ever dealt with. And so that was back in the day when you carried the old Perkins Braille Writer from class to class. It took them about a semester before they got on board and ordered technology, and I got a Braille and Speak and started figuring out how to scan my books and all that. So I went off to college and, of course, got into more technology. And while I was in college, I met and married my husband, and we have 2 kids.
Thanks for joining us for Blink. Visit FedoraOutlier.com/Blink to weigh in with your votes and participate in crowdfunding. We'll see you right here next week. Blink, where employment becomes reality.